The agenda this week spoke to outgoing Green Party leader Elizabeth May, reviewed field notes on being a woman in the Canadian Armed Forces, critiqued science's mistaken understanding of race, and sat down with author Salman Rushdie. The agenda's week in review starts with reaction from some Ontario mayors to the province's decision to back off, forcing municipalities to amalgamate. The fact that the province has opted to do nothing, in your view, is what?
I'll say it was a little anticlimactic. We were expecting some action. We put a lot of effort into it. There were different schools of thought in Niagara. One thing most of us can agree on, we're heavily governed with a lot of politicians. In Niagara, we've got about 430,000 people and 128 elected municipal politicians. That's an awful lot considering just up the highway, Hamilton, they've got 100,000 more people and they do it with 16 people. And knowing that GTA went from 47 to 25, there's a lot bigger areas with much higher numbers with not nearly the representation that we have.
You should just explain that to people, because you do have two-tier government. You have Niagara region, and then you have local municipalities. How many local municipalities in Niagara?
We've got 12 local municipalities, and then we've got the region of Niagara. So between the 12 municipalities and the region, there's there's a big number of municipally elected politicians. And and it's funny, I know some people said more politicians is better because it makes you closer to the people, more democratic. Yet I've never heard anyone say to me, the solution to this problem, we need more politicians.
So are you disappointed that the province did not unilaterally make a decision to change the status quo in Niagara?
I am, and I wish they had have at least come up with a plan. Even if they said to us, we're going to give you 6 months to come to us with a plan on reducing your numbers and showing some consistency through the region. That didn't happen. It was, as I say, anticlimactic, and it was a little disappointing. Nothing came out of it. All that work, all that effort, all that debate, and nothing came out of it.
Let me ask you, for Burlington, you're in Halton region as well. So you're
4 municipalities for roughly the same number. We're just less than 600,000.
How many politicians altogether between?
24 at the region, and in Burlington, actually, the conversation is going the other way. We have a council of 7 for about 190,000 population. We are the smallest council of any size in the country. We cut our council in half in the 90s and have never changed it. So now residents are saying, 4 people to make a decision, and we've got some big decisions. When there's controversy, they want more voices around the table. When things are going well, they're quite happy with the majority of 4.
Do you think you need a larger council to handle the issues that Burlington is facing?
Well, we have talked about it. One of the very first reports that I had to write a year ago as a new mayor was assignments to boards and committees, including citizens advisory committees, local boards like the library. There were over 60 assignments for the 7 of us.
Can you do that?
We do it. We're all very type A, and we don't sleep much.
Sounds like a handful.
But it is a lot to it's a lot to do. Yeah, for sure. So, and the public sees that as well, and they've been asking, do we need more politicians? Well, that conversation was big in the last election. It disappeared during regional review, and the focus was head down, protect what we have. Halton region was working well. We don't want to be a city of Halton. We want to keep the unique identity in Burlington, and we're doing it. We're already small and efficient. So
you're the mayor of Bracebridge. How many members of council?
9 on our local council, but district is another story, so 22 plus a chair. So we are very overrepresented when you look at our total population versus the number of politicians we have. Mind you, we have a vast geographic area and some very different areas throughout Muskoka that do require, I think, a little bit of overrepresentation at the end of the day. But our council, prior to the province coming out with the concept of regional review, was already looking at shrinking the size of our district government. 22 people around a table is a lot, and it's hard to frankly make decisions sometimes with that many voices. So the town of Bracebridge, for example, has myself and 3 other councillors. I think probably 2 of us could carry that message instead of 4. Does raise some questions about workload and those functions at the district and committees that would need to be covered. But I do think we've got too many people around the table. But as I said, we'd started that process already. Maybe this is an opportunity for us to pick that up.
Ms. May, of course, you're all about to get into a minority parliament once parliament reconvenes. And, I want to get your sense about how much impact you think you can have on the government's climate agenda, given that the NDP, which holds the balance of power along with you, are broke. They don't seem to be in much of a position to put pressure on the government in a way that, say, previous balance of power holders could. You might put yourself in the same category. Who knows what the Bloc is going to be cooperative on? As you look towards the next Parliament, what do you think is possible?
I think it really depends on the civil society movements that we saw spring up. And the month of September 20th to 27th saw more than 1 million Canadians participate in action, demanding real climate action. Ironically, one of them was Justin Trudeau and another was Jagmeet Singh, both of whom since the election have shown that climate action is not their priority. It is the Green priority. It's my personal priority. And Paul Manley from Nanaimo Ladysmith and Jenica Atwin from Fredericton, as a caucus of 3, we don't have the numbers that are needed. It could have easily been that we had balance of power if the Conservatives had won more seats and the Liberal gap was narrower than 13. But we have the cards we are dealt, and Greens will stand firm on principle and never vote confidence in a government that doesn't have the climate plan and the climate target that science demands, which means twice what we currently are committed to doing, because the target was left in place by Stephen Harper and hasn't been improved since then. It's not a matter of politics, it's science. It's really coming down to a matter of life and death. And I don't want to sound over dramatic or hyperbolic, but when you look at the daily news coming out of the scientific literature, we are running out of time. So what we do in Parliament can augment only what people can do by pressuring every climate concerned Canadian who thought, well, I can vote Liberal, I can vote NDP, they'll act on climate. It's clear they won't without massive pressure from the public. So I'll be going to the climate negotiations that start next month in Madrid. I will be meeting with the Prime Minister this Friday. On every occasion, in the House, on the streets, in the media, wherever we mobilize as Greens, we'll be demanding that Canada pull our fair share of the weight to respond to this global emergency. We're not there yet. We must be. And we're not worried about having another election. We're not broke. We ended up, with in a good financial position relative to where we always are. We don't have the money of the big guys, but we don't have the debt of the big guys either. We're ready for an election any time if it means getting climate action.
It was a bit of the family business, and I'm going to read an excerpt from the book that indicates that. Here we go. Although neither Dad nor Grandpa T could ever say the words post-traumatic stress disorder, both men carried the weight of its symptoms as though they'd gained 100 pounds, the mental conditions burden impossible for family and colleagues to ignore. My anxiety was bred into me. Dad's was a product of military experience, and en route to basic training, I wondered if the war I'd inevitably be facing would crack me in half like it had to the men of my family. Given that you had all of that weighing on you, or certainly as an example to you, it kind of prompts the question doubly. Why do this?
I think there are a lot of friends I know, we call them military brats, who we grew up with in the military environment. It really becomes what you know, and there's a lot of comfort in that. And I really think because a lot of us grow up on military bases, you see that pride and that honor in serving something bigger than yourself. I think that's a really big part of it. Without getting kind of corny and saying it's a calling, there is this part where I never thought I would join the military. And then this happened, and I thought, well, now I know why my dad goes to work every morning. Now I know why he's away from home for 6 months, for a year, what have you. So
there's a line in your book saying soldiers are designed for suffering. How so?
I don't know if we can ever ask anyone to go see some of the things our soldiers see and expect them to come home unchanged. I think we're lucky in Canada where there's an element where we're a bit removed from that kind of violence in a way. And so when we go overseas and we see people suffering, or for me often when I would see them come home and see them suffering, it's almost like a cross we bear in service to the country.
Let's talk a bit about some of the suffering you underwent, and you really do describe it in great detail in the book.
Thank you.
Talk about the first few days of basic training. What was that like?
A bit of an eye-opener. I definitely got to basic training expecting that it would be physically hard, and mentally hard. My dad had given me a bit of a warning. But definitely the frame of reference I had for what military life was going to be like was through the perspective of men in my family, no women. And so I didn't quite expect that there would be this added barrier of the sexism. So the first few days, I think I got in there thinking it was just going to be this game between me and the core staff, not as much of what divisive experience it would be, and a uniting experience, but between my coworkers, my platoon mates.
But you certainly anticipated, you know, the grunt work, the puking, all of that stuff, right?
So much puking. So many push-ups, so much puking.
Yes, so much puking.
Yeah.
But it was the rest of it you didn't anticipate.
Yes.
Okay. At what point does the feeling of really not belonging set in?
Pretty early on, we were a really small platoon, which wasn't common. So there's only about 20 of us when normally there's about 60 people in a platoon.
And where are you at this point?
We're in Saint-Jean, Quebec.
Okay.
That's where our basic training's done. And so we're far away from home. And I definitely had an inkling pretty early on because I stood out because I was really physically weak. I mean, I just could not keep up. So I already stood out for that. And then we would get into inspections and the course staff would be asking me, do you worry that everyone thinks you're weak? And does that concern you? Well, of course it concerns me. So it was sort of picking at that scab of insecurity and really highlighting it in a way that I hoped was to build me up, but was doing more breaking me down.
You mentioned the academic journal, Mankind Quarterly. Why is it significant?
So the Mankind Quarterly was invented after the Second World War as a means for the few scientific racists that there still were in circulation after the Second World War, as a means to disseminate the kind of work that other journals would not publish. It was funded by a very wealthy, multimillionaire textile heir called Wycliffe Draper, an American who was very much committed to segregation, to maintaining segregation in the US. And for him, if he could present an intellectual case in favor of segregation, then somehow he could, you know, promote that political view. So what he did through the Mankind Quarterly is fund scientists and journals that would defend the idea that racial mixing was somehow dangerous to the race. And he used to hand out copies to prominent conservatives in the US to kind of push this ideology. What to me is remarkable, so the first issue of Mankind Quarterly came out early 1960s, I think 1961. It was roundly debunked at the time. Mainstream scientists just thought it was shockingly bad, not just in terms of poor scholarship and for moral reasons, but also they pointed out the typographical errors. It was just shoddy in every way. And yet, it is still in publication today.
Why is that significant that it's still around?
It just goes to show that the intellectual circles that kept scientific racism alive after the Second World War are still with us now. They have nurtured these ideas for 70 years, gently tailoring the arguments, changing the kind of language that they use, developing euphemisms around racial difference in order to make it more palatable. And they're winning. Online now, Mankind Quarterly is just one of many scientific racist publications that exist. They are circulating on social media. And when we look at the rise of the alt-right and the far right, and sometimes we feel shocked that it seems to have happened suddenly. There's nothing sudden about it. For all these decades, they have been carefully biding their time, and this is their moment.
Who's funding it?
It's difficult to say. So Wycliffe Draper's Pioneer Fund, long after he died, was funding scientific racists, and it's only relatively recently, as far as we know, that the Pioneer Fund has run out of money. But there are other sources of funding now. They're very shadowy. I did look into it when I was writing Superior, but it's very difficult when, you know, you have bank accounts in the Bahamas to know exactly where the funding is coming from, but they are getting funding from somewhere.
You also discuss in the book the popularity of ancestry kits. How did those come about?
So DNA ancestry testing, for me, paradoxically, given all the brilliant genetic evidence that we have now to show how similar we are, has in ways reinforced in the public imagination that race must be real. Because if you can do these DNA ancestry tests, then how can race not be real if it can tell you where you are from? I think people don't always understand how these tests work. Like I said, difference is subtle. So for example, in my case, I know exactly where my ancestry lies. My parents are from a certain region of North India, Punjab. And as far as I know, their family have lived there for as long as we can remember. Now, when I had my test done, not voluntarily, I should say, I was making a television documentary and the producers had my test done. And I would have thought, at the very least, they could pin me down to India, you know, which is a huge country in itself. My test told me I was 96% South Asian. So just imagine what a huge swathe of the world that is, like
That
a
was
third
shocking
of the world.
to hear. Yeah.
But actually, that is what we should expect, given the fuzziness of this. When we do these tests, we imagine that they're looking at ancestry. They're not.
Why do you think they're so popular?
What they're actually doing is comparing your genome to the genomes of other people living who have had these tests done.
Do you feel like our cultural tastes have declined or expanded?
Well, there's always been trash. You know, I mean, that's to say, I mean, throughout the whole history of the human race, there's been trash and there's been better stuff. And actually, a lot of my life, I have not really tried to distinguish between those two. I'm just as interested in pop music as in opera, you know. But what I think is particular about right now is that the trash has got trashier. The gulf between trash and the good stuff has got wider. And that's why I thought, you know, if Cervantes was alive now, what would his target be? You know, and I thought it would probably be the trashier parts of our current culture. And I do think there's I mean, the book has a lot of fun with reality television and so on. But I think the serious point is that I think not just on television, but also on the internet, there's a kind of blurring between what is true and what is not true. You know, I mean, reality television is not reality. It's highly manipulated and massaged reality, and it's in a way unreality.
But what impact does that have on people
us?
watching on us? Because a lot of people do think that that is real.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If you inhabit a media environment in which you are really unable to distinguish between truth and lies, then if that boundary becomes blurred, that's quite a dangerous place for a culture to be, you know, which unscrupulous persons can exploit.
Do you think we're there now?
Yeah, I do. I mean, that's, you know, the book, I think, is written more or less as a comedy, but I think under the comedy, there's that.
When you wrote the Satanic Verses, your name became synonymous with free speech. How hard is it to wage that battle right now?
I mean, there it is. I think, you know, one of the reasons I live in the United States was because of my admiration for the First Amendment. You know, and I've never known it to be so much under attack as it is now. You know, when you have journalists being called enemies of the people, you know, and when you have a journalist in trouble in Egypt with the United States president won't help, and the Irish president Irish government has to intervene to rescue him, you know. These are very worrying days when I think I read somewhere the other day that more journalists were attacked and killed in the last year than in any previous year. So I think it's a dangerous time. But again, one of the reasons why I think writers of all kinds, whether fiction or nonfiction, you know, need to stand up for this stuff, you know, is because it's the freedom without which all the other freedoms vanish.
Do you ever think about what it would have been like if you had released the Satanic Verses now?
No. I mean, yeah, I think it might have been more difficult. You know, I think because that was in the novel. There's a term of BG, which is before Google.
And then after Google,
and
AG.
after Google.
Yeah.
I think, you know, the same thing happening in the age of the internet would have been more dangerous, more explosive than it was then.
And that's just some of what we covered this week on the agenda. For more information, including the full conversations, you can visit our website, that's tvo.org, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, or our Twitter feed, that's twitter.com/theagenda.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.